Hello everybody, welcome to my channel, Spectre Paints. Today we will be going over Imotekh or Imotekh. Please correct me in the comments on that one. And without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing that we are going to do is start with a base coat. I prefer black myself. I think the actual color is Chaos Black. And then we're going to go in with a base of Leadbelcher. This is going to go over all of the silver parts of the figure, and I do about 2 coats here. Also, if you don't want those streaks that you may be coming across in your metallic paints, be sure to thin it down and do it in multiple layers. As well as that, keep your brush strokes going in the same direction. If you find yourself that you have different patterns in your metal that you don't necessarily want, keep your brush strokes going in the same direction and that should fix your problem. I do about 2 coats of Leadbelcher here to make sure I don't see any black underneath the figure. With that done, he's looking pretty good. And the next step that we are going to take here is a wash. The wash we're going to use is Nuln Oil. I'm not diluting this, I'm just putting this directly on the figure, on all of the silver parts. Now, I don't want to necessarily pool this, I don't want it dripping anywhere, it's just 2 regular coats. In the cracks and crevices, it can pool just a little bit, but I'm not going for anything extreme because this faction, I should say, tends to be pretty neat. So I'm doing 2 coats of Nuln Oil over top of the entirety of the silver here. And with that done, what I'm doing here is taking a mix of Nuln Oil and Ratling Grime, just a 1-to-1 ratio, and I am very heavily pooling it in those rib areas, as well as the 2 little areas he has, I don't know, in his crotch. And I'm just making sure that pools particularly heavily, because if you look at the box art, those almost seem black, but there is a bit of something metallic shining through, so I decided to go for a wash. And with that all done, he's looking a little bit duller, so we're going to go with Iron Hand Steel, and we're going to do a light dry brush on the entirety of the figure. Now, I'm emphasizing places that will be catching light. The entirety of the silver does get dry brushed here, but I am emphasizing, for example, the tops of his thighs there, his knees, maybe his chest area and his face, just places that will catch light a little bit more effectively than other areas of the figure. And with that done, he's looking a good bit more polished, but we're going to go in with another dry brush of Necron Compound. Now this, I'm not doing over the entirety of the figure. I will only be touching the areas that I want to be particularly emphasized by the light. So again, the tops of the thighs, any of his joints, his face, shoulders, elbows, hands, and the front plating of this crotch area, I won't be going into it. Same thing with his back. I won't be going inside that with this dry brush. I'm just catching the edges of those plates. And with that, he's looking pretty polished now. So we're going to be going in with Runefang Steel, and this is going to be an edge highlight. So along all those plates, I am just putting this on the very edges so it really catches that light. Along his crotch area, his hip armor, his knees, some of it on his feet as well. I do a lot of emphasis as well on that spine area that he has. Fingers, anything like that. And here I'm going in between the ribs, so that will really contrast that dark wash that we put inside of those. And with that done, the silver on him is pretty much complete here, besides for some final touches that I'll go over later. But he's looking pretty good. Next up, we're going to tackle the warmer colors. So I'm going in with Runelord Brass. This is going to be going on his center chest piece here, the little collars he has, and his pauldrons as well. And then I'm going to be putting it on the outside of his, I don't know, whatever you call that, crotch guard? I don't know. Oh, and this little wire he has going from his bicep to his forearm. And with that done, the next step is to dull this down a little bit with a wash. I'm going to go in with Seraphim Sepia. And I'm just going to be putting this over all the areas that we just painted. Not diluted, just regular old wash. And I'm doing 2 coats as well. Now we're going to start a dry brush with Cantopek Alloy. And if you look at the box art, it's very light. So on this chest piece, I'm just running it along to get that sign that he has on the chest piece. I'm not really hitting the edges with it. With this piece of fabric that he is running here, I'm going very heavy on the bottoms and not too much on the tops. And then with his pauldrons as well, you'll see that this curve he has at the front of his body is more highlighted than the rest of it. So I'm emphasizing the front of those pauldrons, and I'm just dragging it a little bit back to the center, but not too much. And with that done, the brass is almost done. Like I said, we'll be going over some specific details a little bit later on, but it's pretty much complete now. You can stop here with the brass if you'd like to. Next up, we're going to be covering the wires with some Naggaroth Night, I think it's called. And we're going to be touching those wires. He has one here in his forearm and a few that are in his chest. And to highlight those, we're going to be going in with this lilac color. Dechala Lilac. And we're just going to be running it along the edges of those wires. A very thin stripe. I tend to use a pointed round brush. And with that done, the purple here we have is done. A nice little extra color we have in there besides silver and green. The next thing we're going to be going in with is Mechanicus Standard Grey. Now this I have diluted with some water so it's not so opaque. And we're going to be going along the edges of these panels on his loincloth, I guess it's called. And then some Dawnstone as well. And it's just the same concept. I'm only really hitting the edges, I would say, and around these circles, these orbs with this color as well, just some final highlight. And with that Mechanicus Standard Grey as well, I'm going to be dry brushing the grip of the staff. With that done, I'm going to be going in with Iron Breaker. And I'm just going to be hitting these little dots that you can find in the center of his staff. This is how he's looking so far. Pretty clean, if I do say so myself. While that all dries, we're going to be going into the cape now. The first color I'm starting out with is Stegadon Scale Green. It may seem like a blue, or too much of a blue color, but we're going to be shifting it later on, so don't worry. Just with a normal base coat of this, I go in with 2 coats, cover the entirety of the cape with it. Next up, I'm going to be taking some Sotek Green, and with an airbrush as well. You might be able to manage this if you do dilute it with some water and hit it with multiple layers, but myself, I tend to use airbrush. And if you look at the box art, there are certain raised ridges that I'll be highlighting here with just some water, where the light tends to hit a little heavier than the rest of the cape. And I'm going to be going in all those areas with Sotek Green. Tends to be along the top of these little furrows, along the edges as well, tend to get some more light. Same thing on the inside as well. How I usually dilute this, you can do it a few ways. I tend to do it with water and an airflow or flow aid additive, and it tends to work pretty well. I've seen people do it with a contrast medium and some water as well if you don't have any flow aid, and that tends to work pretty well for them. And with that part done, we're going to shift the color. I'm going to be using a shade Casandora Yellow, and I'm going to be airbrushing this on the entirety of the cape. Now this will shift it from that very stark blue to more of kind of a teal color. And here we are with those base dark colors. They're looking pretty similar to the box art, so I'm happy with that. Now we have to highlight. So I'm going to take some Corax White, and this is just going to be for a base coat because the next color we're going to put on, I just like having white behind it. And I don't know how to pronounce this one, to be 100% honest with you. Nihilakh Oxide? Nihilakh Oxide? Correct me in the comments. And we're putting that over the white that we just laid down. The purpose of the white was just to make this a little bit more vibrant because this color tends to be a little bit transparent. With that done, we're looking pretty good, but we're going to go back in with some Corax White and we're going to dry brush just only along those highest ridges of this cape to really bring some definition into it. Now I'm going back in with Stegadon Green, and I'm just going to put these in the darkest recesses, dry brushing as well. This will help bring back some of the definition I may have personally lost with my airbrush. I don't have that much of a thin tip. I'm looking into getting a thinner tip for my airbrush, but we work with what we have. So if you find yourself needing to redarken those recesses, this is a good way to do it. And with that done, what I'm doing here is a final wash of a green. I know that I took Warp Lightning and I diluted it, very much so, and I just ran that over the entirety of the blue here to shift it again to that teal. Now we're going to repeat our process with the brass. So we're going in with Runelord Brass. We're going to do a Seraphim Sepia contrast, 2 coats of everything, and then the same dry brush highlight as well. Here's that shade Seraphim Sepia, 2 coats of that. Make sure it doesn't pool too heavily. And when you start getting into this contrast, as well as the dry brush, you'll see me start to compare this side of the pauldron with the pauldrons I've already finished on the figure. Because what you don't want is any hard lines of difference between the two. You want them to blend pretty seamlessly. So I found by matching these two together, there are some areas that need a little bit more dry brush or that need to be covered again with Seraphim Sepia just so that they match very well. I prefer to do my figures in as many pieces as I can while I'm painting, but this was a commission, so it was already glued together for the most part. Now we're going to go in with Iron Warriors, and we're going to be painting these little bugs here. So every one of them gets a good coat of Iron Warriors first. And then I'm going to go in with Ratling Grime, a 1-to-1 mixture with a contrast medium, just so it's diluted just a little bit. And I'm doing 2 coats on each of these bugs. If you look in the box art, they tend to be pretty dark, with a pretty vibrant highlight. So next thing with Moot Green is that little green dot they have on the center of their body. And then finally, with Cantopek Alloy, we're going to be highlighting this. Now what I do is, he has a little dot for a head, so I'll hit that dot, as well as all of his legs with Cantopek Alloy. And if you trust your brush skills, you can highlight just the edges. You'll see at the back, or in the bum, I guess, of these bugs, there's a line that goes straight through it. I like to highlight on either side of that line, and the way I do that is I run the back of the brush along it, so that it can hit both sides without digging into that recess. Alright, with that, the cape is done. So we're going to be moving back to the main figure here. Here's how he's looking with his cape. Pretty good so far. We're going to be going in with Iron Hand Steel. And what we'll be doing with this is covering some of these silver accents that he has on his weapon. It's just going to be the middle bar here, and you'll see that he does have some, how would I put it, cuffs, I suppose, for lack of a better word, along the staff of this weapon. I don't know what the weapon would be called either. And these little grills that it has. There's one of those cuffs, there's another. And there's two more down here. Alrighty. With that done, we're going to be going in with Leadbelcher. And here we're hitting some of the darker accents. Now on the box art, it does look almost black, but it's a different shade than the box art. So how I interpreted that myself was Leadbelcher, with a really dark wash on it. So we're going to be hitting those darker areas there. And with Basilicanum, I think it's called, Grey, we will be washing our silver, not our darker silver, but our lighter silver. And this is a 1-to-1 ratio with our contrast medium. I do 2 coats. And then I know it doesn't look like it, but what I'm using here is Black Legion, and this is what we'll be covering our darker silver with. I am not adding a contrast medium. This is just straight out of the pot, so it almost does look black, but not quite. And then with Iron Breaker, I'm going to be dry brushing those silver accents. Just the larger ones. You don't have to worry about the cuffs with this, because we'll be going on with an edge highlight right here with our Stormhost Silver. With these grates, I'm not hitting the entirety of them. You'll see that they have a small corner where they bend. That's where I'm putting that silver. Alrighty, and with that done, we're going to be going in with Cantopek Alloy. And if you look at the center of his staff, he does have this little symbol. This is what I'll be painting that symbol with. Be very careful. You don't want this color anywhere but on that extremely thin line. There's two ways to do this. If you're confident in your brush strokes, you can go in with the tip of your brush, or you can do like I did before, with the back of that bug, and just use the edge or the side of your brush in order to hit that small symbol. Now with this Mechanicus Grey, what I'll be doing is highlighting the black areas of the staff. It's mostly along the center part here. I'm not going around the entirety of it. What I am doing is, you'll see that it has it's an oval, right? So along one side and half a corner of an oval, I will be dragging this color. Not around the entirety of it. You can if you'd like. I just find that's a little bit too much of a highlight. And then here with Dawnstone, I'm doing the exact same thing, but on a slightly smaller area. So along the center of the highlight that I just created, I'm going to be putting this. So if you look, I'm just putting it in two corners. I guess it's not corners, two edges, I suppose, of this oval. Not all the way around. Trying to show a better angle. If you can see there, it's just in the corners that I've highlighted. Edge? Corner? Is there a corner in an oval? I don't know. Now, with Moot Green, we're going to be painting in these blades now. And while you're here, do the orbs that he also has on his staff as well. We have the color out. You can now paint the other orbs that he does have on his body that are green. I do it later, but if you have the paint out, you might as well. Here I'm doing the orbs on those pauldrons. And now in a 1:2 ratio, 1 brushfuls to 2 brushfuls of Warp Lightning and Contrast Medium, I will be doing this little detail that he has on his weapon here. So if you look on the weapon, there are essentially two planes. There's an outer edge to his blade, and there's an inner edge to his blade, and you'll see a curved edge to guide you there. And how I'm doing it here is on the very top of that curved edge, I'm going on the outside. In the middle of his staff, I'm going around that silver accent. And then on the bottom of his staff, I am going on the outer edge of that curved highlight, or curved edge. You're going to need quite a few coats on this, and that's the point, to create a diffused line. You don't want any harsh lines here. I think I end up doing 7 coats, 8 coats, to really get the effect that I wanted. I do refer back to the box art just to make sure I'm getting the amount of contrast that I want. And here on the bottom two blades, what I'm doing, again, you'll see that same edge highlight. On the bottom of the blades, I'm going along the outer edge of that, and on the top of the blade, I am going along the inner edge. What makes this particular effect effective is to have it in sort of a cell block. So instead of smoothly gliding your brush from the inside to the outside, what I would do is if I'm starting on the outside, I would make a cell, almost a square or a rectangle of color, and then immediately start on the inside cell after that and do the same thing. So there will be a horizontal line across those colors, but it will be diffused. And now what I'm doing here, again with a airbrush, is I'm taking Flash Gitz Yellow, and I'm going along these orbs. Now this is just a personal preference of mine. It is not on the box art, but I do tend to like the way that it does look. I will be toning it down. There we go. But I go along the tops of these orbs here, and it creates a nice light diffusion that I tend to particularly like. Again, it's not on the box art. It's nothing you do need to do, but I do like it myself. I do this again, or on his pauldrons, his hand, anywhere I do find those green orbs. And here we are, pretty much completed. To finish the bottom here, we're going in with some Moot Green. This is going to be going in all of those lines that you see at the bottom of the figure. Be careful to differentiate. There are some cracks, I think some stone cracks in this bottom part. Careful to differentiate the two. I'm also going to be covering that with some Tesseract Glow, just to give it a little bit more of a vibrant color. There we are with that. Now with some Abaddon Black, with that same technique I was talking about, with just the side of a brush, or if you have a flat brush here, I'm going along those lines as well, just so we can clean up the edges there. You can do it however you're comfortable with, but I find the time, or what takes the least amount of time, is to very, very lightly run an edge of a brush over top of those, so it doesn't dig into that recess, but it covers the edges. With that, we're done with the green highlight we have there. The next step we have is to take some Leadbelcher, and he has these plates that are embedded into two of these platforms he's standing on. One of them is right here. It's where you see this lettering, and I'm going to fill that in, both of them, with Leadbelcher. With some Basilicanum Grey, not diluted, we're going to go over top of the silver that we just did. This has been stood on. It's a little bit weather worn, so I do tend to use a little bit more, let it pool a little bit more. It makes it look a little bit dirtier. And finally for the silver, we're going to be going in with Cantopek Alloy with a very, very precise and light dry brush, just so we're hitting the edge of those letters that it has in there. Now to show you, or just trying to show you, here we see that the inner parts of those plates are darker and dirtier, and it's only the letters that have been highlighted here. Now we're going to be going in with some Iron Warriors, just for those two bugs that are on these plates, the exact same process that we had before. A simple wash with some Ratling Grime, not diluted. These, I think they're on the ground, so they tend to be a little bit dirtier. I'm going to go in a little bit heavier. Then Cantopek Alloy, the same highlights on his small little head, his legs, and that one line that runs along their back. Moot Green, that little dot in the middle as well. And now with some Mechanicus Standard Grey, we're just going to be doing an edge highlight on these plates. And then finally, our last step was some technical Astrogranite. You see he has a little dirt patch that's attached to those plates. I'm going to be filling that in with that. And then we have our final coating. I like to use a matte varnish. This step is not at all necessary, but since someone paid me to do this, I tend to go a little bit above and beyond. I like the matte varnish. Specifically, it's a removable varnish. So if they decide they want a different color scheme, if they decide to give it to another artist, to do something else, if it ends up in the hands of somebody else, whatever, it's removable. So it's not stuck like that forever. Now to talk about some of the details that I did beforehand. Now these are above and beyond details. Some of the things that I decided to do was some edge highlights along the brass with some Cantopek Alloy. As well as along his weapon, I took some Moot Green again. I ran those along the edges. That is not necessary. And with some Tesseract Glow, I went over top of the orbs that I already did, and around the orbs as well on whatever metal or fabric that it's on, just so it gives it that kind of glow effect that I really like. Again, it's unnecessary. It's not on the box art, but I tend to like it myself. I also did the same effect around his eyes. Now, if you do look at the box art, his eyes do glow, so you can use Tesseract Glow to achieve that effect around those eyes. And other than that, I think that's about it for the extras that I decided to do. And we are done with the figure. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments, as well as I don't know this game at all. I'm a painter, so I paint these figures, but I don't know the lore. If this is one of your favorite characters, or if you're extremely passionate about the game, like the players tend to be, feel free to give me a lore lesson in the comments. I don't mind reading those at all. They're very insightful. And with the amount of lore that's in this game, it's a little bit easier for me to digest in that fashion, if you so choose. But other than that, again, if you have any questions, let me know. And I hope you guys enjoyed my version of this particular figure.